Sit downers. Dean Goronitis, Unleash This Book Reviews, bringing you book reviews through YouTube, letting you know what I thought about books that I read. And no, not necessarily that the books are good or that the books are bad, because most of the books I check out are classics, and when you're talking about classics, everybody has a different opinion. But these are my opinions. And this week, past week or week and a half, I checked out Watchmen, which was written by Alan Moore and drawn up artistically by Dan Gibbons. Probably got that first name wrong. Anyways, Watchmen is arguably the most important, most influential, and most famous graphic novel written yet. Arguably. Published as a 12-book comic series through 1986 and 87. The story revolves around a group of heroes. Now, I don't know if you'd want to necessarily call them superheroes, as out of the 6 that the story mainly details, only one of them has real powers, supernatural powers. The rest are just humans like you or me who had decided back in the 60s and early 70s that they wanted to fight crime as heroes, not as policemen or military figures, but masked vigilantes. One of the things that really gets it going is it's just packed with history and storylines and thought-provoking material. Now, I'd say probably about 50 years time span is covered in and out throughout this book, flashbacks and things like that. For example, there was an old group of superheroes before the Watchmen, known as the Minutemen. And these guys really symbolically seem to represent the golden age of comic books in the early and late. I'm pretty sure I'm not a comic book super nerd. That's a bad term. You guys who read comic books are awesome. Anyways, the golden age of comics in the 50s, when, you know, superheroes were very simplistic. They just represented America's desire for, you know, heroes who really stood up for moral purposes. You know, in a time when we were stuck going through World War II just previously, the decade before, and things like that, people wanted these moral high grounds to look up at and you know, really appreciate. And the Minutemen in this series really represent that. Now, the Minutemen eventually disband, and what we get instead is this new group of potential heroes, and Alan Moore really takes a look here at what our generations, or maybe the 80s when it was written, but it really holds true even in today's time, our generation's heroes would possibly look at. Alan Moore wanted this to be the comic book version of Moby Dick. He was quoted as saying something similar to that, and you can tell in the details of the story that's what he really thought. Now, if you look at Moby Dick, if you've read Moby Dick or if you're familiar with it, it's full of micro little stories, details that, you know, maybe aren't necessary to know for the strong main plot line going through the story, but really give it a whole lot of backbone, a lot of back history. It gets you really feeling like you're there, that you're part of the story. And Alan Moore really tried to do that too. As a supplement at the end of every issue of the series when it was first published, there would be a solid block of maybe 3 to 5 pages of text at the end of the story. Now, this text was done creatively. It's not just random text. It would be either pages taken out of a book that was mentioned earlier in the comic book, or newspaper clippings that may have been removed from the newspaper stand that is featured in the story. And these text supplements give a lot of history, another interpretation on things going on in the story. Now, I found as I read through chapter like 6, you know, book 6 or so, I started to lose interest in these extra details. And that kind of happened to me with Moby Dick too, where you skim by the stuff because you realize that certain parts of it just really aren't that important, and that, you know, maybe you're not as interested in this level of detail as some other people are. And those of you who are, it's there for you, it's supplemented, and it's ready to go. For those of you who aren't, it doesn't really hurt to pass by it, you know? What are you going to do? Now, the artwork is also loaded with info too. Not in the same way as words can be used, but if you look at every panel in the story, there's a lot of detail in each picture, a lot of little things you can pick up in the background, and, you know, imagery that just keeps reoccurring throughout the story. Now, the majority of the book is done in a traditional 3 rows of 3 panels each, so you get 9 separate panels in each page of the book. Now, Moore really appreciated this because it was a shout back to, you know, older times in comics, but also it helps to really pace the story, and while he was writing it, he could better put together the way things would happen, knowing that he'd get 9 boxes per page. Now, Dan Gibbons is not completely restricting himself to that. There are certain times where he uses full page layouts to really showcase some gruesome details. And when he does do this, he does it sparingly for great effect. When you see one of these full page blowouts, you stop for a second, breathe in, really take in the details, and it helps to really show the the large scale either destruction or, you know, emotional feelings that he really wants to get across, and he does so well. Now, there's also a lot of other smaller details that I probably have oh man. So it's like the second time in a couple months that my batteries died out on me. Anyways, I was talking about the details and the art, I believe. And there's a lot that I'm sure went over my head, and I'm looking forward to hearing your guys' comments on this book because I'm sure you're going to show me a lot of stuff that I never even knew was there. But one of these details, for example, is in Chapter 5, Issue 5, the chapter on symmetry. If you look in the middle of that book, there's a page that if you were to close it together would match perfectly, and if you go from outside there, everything, all the other pages would also match up really well too, just as if you were matching the pages together like a Rorschach ink blot, for example. Little details like that make this story really cool. You'll also notice that the artwork in the book seems slightly dated. Now, I'm sure part of this just has to do with the fact that the book was published in, you know, the mid-'80s, but also I think Gibbons was trying to, you know, make a little bit of an homage to the era of comic book heroes from before his, maybe after the golden age of like the 50s, but like that 70s era look here, to make people comfortable comfortable in something that they already understand. Moore and Gibbons really wanted to take the universe of comic book heroes that people were comfortable with and show a completely different side. Now, I've also read, but I couldn't tell you for truth because I haven't seen the series myself, that the last chapter of this book was more or less ripped off from a TV program that had been airing in the years prior leading up to the publication of this book. And I've heard that some of Alan Moore's friends were even kind of disappointed that he took what they considered to be the easy way out in a book that was so great. And I can understand that argument. What it really links it to me in my head, which I think is kind of interesting, is sampling, especially in like hip-hop music, where hip-hop artists will take music that other artists have made from a long time ago and rework it to fit into what they're trying to do. And I can't see anything really wrong with Alan Moore using this same similar technique in his book. It's not like he doesn't give a shout out to the original television show. I guess it's detailed as being played on a television screen in one of the panels in the last chapter as a little homage, you know. But I, for one, am on the side of hip-hop artists using older stuff and rehashing it into something new, because there is a lot, like 99% of the artwork out there from back in the day that none of us have ever been exposed to and probably would never be exposed to if it wasn't for these artists bringing it back in a new, fresh, exciting, collage-like manner. And I think Alan Moore kind of did that with his book here, so I can't really hound him for that as much as some other people have. Would it have been cool to see an original ending that he came up with himself? Maybe, but it might not have been as good. And he saw this ending that took place somewhere else and used it in his story because he thought it fit well. And you know what? I think that it fits really well as well. All right? That's my take on it. Notes. A couple little things that I wasn't huge on. One, the little side story, which I believe is called The Black Frighter. It's a story about a pirate, and basically it's a comic book within a comic book. One of a very minor side character is reading this pirate comic book, and Alan Moore uses it as sort of, you know, a little minor backup story where you can find references between what's happening in Watchmen and what's happening in this book this character is reading. You can find, you know, matching little points and stuff like that, which is cool. It's extra detail, and I like it. That's awesome. But I found it kind of confusing the way that he would mix these two panels together into one. So you would have one panel, and in like the bottom corner of it you'd get details on what's going on with this pirate ship narrative, and in like the top corner you get details on what's going on in the Watchmen narrative. And I really would have liked to have seen that separated. I actually ended up like rereading when this would happen on a page. I would read the page twice over and just ignoring the one half and reading the other half. It was just kind of confusing. Kind of would have liked to seen that separated, maybe as an extra couple pages in the middle of the story, or just its own panels, you know, something like that. I was also kind of iffy on the quotes that he used. He would use a quote to open up the story and to end the story on each chapter. You know, kind of unnecessary in my opinion. I kind of just would leave that out personally. But there's small little things to pick at in a story which overall is colossus in magnitude and really brilliant and eye-opening, and I think opens up a lot of people to a medium of artwork that they never would have checked out before. There's a lot of other details here, a lot more backstory that you could get into here with this story, and I'm really interested in having a conversation with you guys because there's a lot to go through that I would never be able to get through in a video, but hopefully we can hold some conversations on the stuff that happened here and how you guys felt about it. Really looking forward to that. Next week, I'm checking out In Our Time by Ernest Hemingway, which was the winner of the contest that was held a few weeks back. He chose that book, so that's what I'm going to do next. After that, I'm probably going to finish Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. Other than that, that's all I got really lined up. Alright, so I'll see you guys soon. Let me know what you thought about Watchmen. More than a lot of other books, I'd like to discuss this one, alright? So, I'll see you guys. Thanks.